Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Marketers Blueprint for the Future. I am Danica Konetski, the Consumer Products Industry Principal for Treasure Data. And as we begin, let me just let you know that a recorded version of this webinar will be made available. So feel free to see the attachments below. And we would love to hear from you. If you have any questions or comments at all during or after this session, please just submit them in the Q&A. So, with all of the housekeeping behind us and out of the way, let's make a start. Today, I've invited Carole Irgang, the co-founder of Radically Simple Marketing, to do yet another webinar with me. We did our first webinar in July, and we had such fun and had such a great chat about the concept of reciprocal value between brands and their consumers, particularly when a brand holds any amount at all of consumers' personal information. But Carole is not only the co-founder of Radically Simple Marketing, she's also a good friend. And we were preparing for our webinar in July. I learned of a study that Carole had done among about 100 CMOs focused on marketing fundamentals. That study did a deep dive into engagement models and operating models and how all of that comes to life across the ecosystem. And if you're looking at the screen, it won't surprise you to know that I immediately made a connection between Carole's work and her marketing blueprint foundation to what Treasure Data does and our approach and our framework. And I say that because we create one single consumer data layer, one single data foundation, and plug it, integrate it right into the ecosystem. Then we apply predictive analytics and machine learning to create insights that are in service to and support all of our marketers, all of our CX professionals as they seek to drive more relevant, more resonant, more meaningful, and more motivating engagement and consumer experiences. So I wanted to learn more. So that's the basis of our webinar today. And Carole, I'm wondering if you could tell us why you did this survey and what you hope to learn and how you thought it might help your marketing and business clients.
Well, thanks again for inviting me back. I really appreciate that. And so the Marketer's Blueprint actually grew out of quite a few years of work. And we just sort of crystallized it in this blueprint capability. And what we saw happening in the marketplace is that marketing was changing, and for marketers to have a seat in the C-suite, for CMOs to have a seat at the table, they really needed to sort of move and evolve from a comms role, advertising and all of that, to a much more business-oriented growth acceleration role. And in order to do that, CMOs started to realize, I need better data. I need more information. I need to be able to move faster and swifter and things like that. And so they started to look across the landscape to say, what capabilities do I need to start building this more growth acceleration perspective for my organization? And that doesn't mean we give up the comms and the advertising and all of that beautiful work that they do, but we need to think about it more as a business driver and an ROI generator, and we need to be able to prove that to sustain that seat at the C-suite table. The other thing that they were realizing, CMOs, is that the speed of marketing was just changing at some crazy speed, and no longer could, especially in CPG organizations and big CPG organizations, where they had lengthy processes. I've worked with clients that had, a 32-week process to get to market on something. No one has 32 weeks anymore. You don't have 32 seconds anymore. And everything has to be so real time. And so what marketers started to realize also is that the speed of the feed, if you will, was driving their need to be able to move with much greater agility and much greater simplified and in some ways automated work processes and workflows. And so they started to say to themselves, how do I do that? What kind of technology do I use to do that, right? So that was a whole new capability that they were trying to bring to the table, especially, again, in big CPG organizations, even medium-sized ones that are really fragmented and very diverse. Is how do you bring all those siloed teams together to work with that speed and agility? So that was a big driver for, we saw what CMOs were challenged with.
Carole, can I ask you, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but do you think that the real difference is the speed? Because it's been true for a while, right? That we need data and, measurement and insights. Is the real difference the speed and the available technology? Our jobs are the same, but we just have to do them faster.
Yes, we have to do them faster, but we also have to have data accessible and readable and actionable faster. And that's a big issue, right? We hadn't necessarily had that in sort of the old days, if you will. But the third big factor for what drove this study and capability is that what we also saw is that as marketers started to bring in more data and more information, and I will contend, I don't think CPG marketers have a lack of data. I think in some cases they have too much data. The problem is, how do I action it? How do I distill it? How do I make it actionable? How do I do that faster and smarter, right? What are the real KPIs that I really need to be looking at, as opposed to I'm boiling the ocean and looking at everything and then have to figure out what's actionable. So that became a big driver. And so what we saw CMOs starting to do is kind of get shiny object syndrome. Oh, I need to have a new platform to do blah, blah, blah. And they'd go out and they'd buy something and they'd put it into the organization and the change management wasn't there. And suddenly they had this expensive new shiny object that was not being optimized and not being well leveraged. And they kind of felt like, why did I buy that? Right. And these are not stupid people. These are really smart people. It seemed like it made sense at the time, but unless you think about this stuff holistically, a tool is probably not going to be the answer. Right. And I think the last piece that is driving all of this churn and change is that it's all in the spirit of getting closer and closer to their consumer, to the person who's buying their product. And so if I'm going to be a modern marketer and I'm going to future-proof my business, I need to really have a personalized approach to engaging with my consumer. And the only way you're going to get to personalization, especially in organizations that have been so mass forever, is with different data capabilities, different technology capabilities that are seamlessly linked together. And so we saw these factors of, how do I drive more growth and be an acceleration engine for the organization? How do I work faster and smarter? How do I leverage all this data that I have at my fingertips? And how do I do it in the spirit of getting closer to my consumer? And that's where we saw the numbness on the faces of these CMOs, is I don't know where to begin. And what we started to see was that oftentimes this conversation around what do I need was a confusion and a conflation, if you will, of skills, which are people-based, right? And capabilities, which are organizationally based. And it was often like, well, my people don't know how to do digital, or they don't know how to sort of, leverage data really well. Those are skills issues. It doesn't matter if you have the skill or not. If you don't have the capability and the engines and the data and the technology to enable it, doesn't matter if you have the skills or not, right? So the conversation often had that conflation to it. And so we said, you know what? we kind of have a really good sense of what the capabilities are that people need. Let's now go create a survey to understand, and we did it across industries. So we had about a little over 100 CMOs across sectors. So mostly CPG, that was the biggest penetration we had. We had financial services, we had healthcare, we had retail, we had tech, and some telecom. And we sent this survey out to it was about 150 CMOs. We got about 100 responses or so back, which is pretty good. And what we asked them was really two simple questions. Of all of these capabilities, and we had listed about 39, which are the most important to your organization to drive impact, i.e. growth? Revenue growth, share growth, whatever it is, impact in your organization to your business, and which of these are the most difficult or easy to implement. Mm-hmm. So it was an impact scale from least to most, and then a difficulty for implementation scale of easiest to most difficult. 2 questions against 39 questions. We got an amazing response.
That's why it was 2 questions.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was, listen, it wasn't that the survey took a long time. It was probably about 20 minutes, but you had to think about it. You really had to think about what's going to give me impact in my organization, and knowing my culture and my organizational design and my setup and all of that. Like, what am I going to be able to do or not do? So they were you had to really think about the answers. So that's why we only had about 100 people respond, but the data is amazing. So I don't know if you want to put up the summary chart of what we learned.
Sure. Give me 1 second. Yeah, sure. So I like to always start with the end in mind. So can we start with the high heart here?
It's great. And what it really kind of told us is data and technology, no big surprise, are the underlying foundation to all of the marketing capabilities that are going to enable organizations to be future-proofed. So that's just a fact of life. The next is that they're all very interrelated, or many of them are very interrelated, and that for organizations to implement these capabilities, they actually have to think about them holistically, because you may want one capability, but in order to implement that capability, you may need 3 others in order to create the foundation or the pipes in order to enable that one thing that you want. So lots of interrelationships here, and that's where sort of it gets hard sometimes for organizations to implement. And when CMOs buy that one shiny object, it may not be interrelated and connected to all the other things they need to really enable it with the power that they're hoping and expecting. And then the last one, and this you'll see in the data, is outcomes-based measurement. So not just, like a series of numbers, but outcomes that impact your business, that drive that growth and accelerate that growth that you're looking for, is really what is driving and tracking towards success. So you'll see on the next chart how that capability itself actually scores very, very high. This is an example. You know what, Danica, let's go to the summary chart with all the colored boxes, because I think that'll be a better transition, and then we'll come back to this so I can explain.
Okay.
Sorry. It was the one with all the industry one, and then I'll explain the CPG.
Oh, I actually don't have that one. Sorry.
Oh, okay. So what we found. So let's sit here on the CPG one.
Okay, I'll move back to that one. All right.
Sorry about that.
No, we're good. Go ahead.
So on the CPG version of the data, so we basically took the industry and then we broke it by sector. So from a CPG sector standpoint, what we found was that they were very equally weighted in terms of the ecosystem, the engagement model, and the operating model in terms of the capabilities that they thought would be the most important for impact and varying degrees of difficulty. But you can see, one, they're evenly spread for the most part in terms of capabilities across all of them, which is good in that it It says that CPG marketers are looking holistically across the blueprint, if you will, for how to best enable their organization. So that's the good thing. The bad thing is that there's no focus. And so where you would see, for example, in some other industries like retail or financial services, where there was a heavy weighting on impact and need for personalization and real-time insights and single view of customer and things like that. Those industries are very driven by personalized relationships and really having as much first-party data as humanly possible to drive that personalized engagement. CPG is still evolving in that regard. And so what this says in terms of what's falling in each of these buckets is they're equally focused on all of these, which again, holistically is great because they're building a more holistic outcome. It's just a little bit harder because where do you focus? And so, Danica, if you go back to the other page with the circles, I'll actually explain why this might be an issue for CPG organizations.
So can I ask you before you start, just to ground?
Please.
Yeah, this, with all of the 39 capabilities, I guess I didn't count them on the screen here. Is this CPG or is this the total across the survey?
No, this is a specific example of where we did this survey with a global CPG organization. We basically plotted for them what was the high impact items. So along the bottom, you'll see potential impact to the business. So from left to right, it goes from least impact to highest impact. Mm-hmm. And then along the left side, you'll see, cost and effort. So how much is this going to cost and how difficult is this going to do, from least at the bottom to highest at the top. Mm-hmm. And what you see here, and this is where, again, having a holistic view is a good thing. So when we did this for this global CPG organization, this is what their map looked like. Meaning that what they wanted to do was they really thought that journey-based customer engagement was the thing that was going to drive a lot of impact for them, but it was going to cost a lot and it was going to have a lot of effort attached to it. Well, why is that? Because you have to do all those other things within that number one bubble, if you will, in order to enable that. Right. The same thing with, things in bubble 2 and 3, so on. So what we did for this organization was we mapped the capabilities based on, again, impact and cost and effort. And we got a list, but then we had to sort it for them in a logical way. And that's what the numbers mean, 1, 2, 3A and 3B, that is then the order of logic in which you could implement this in their particular organization in order to sort of build the right capabilities for the future. I'm not saying that you need all 39 capabilities. So let's make sure that we sort of dispel that myth. And this page is probably a 2+ year roadmap of opportunity, right? And things will change in the process. But you have to start somewhere to enable the capability that you're driving towards. And again, in this organization, they really wanted to focus on journey-based customer engagement. And they thought that would give them a good first shot at driving towards the personalization that they were seeking. And again, we sort of mapped this for them. We've started to sort of build some of this out for them. And it's going to be a long journey. And again, I don't want anyone to think, oh my God, I got to do 39 things. You really don't. The other thing I will tell you, there's no organization that I know that is hitting on all 39 capabilities well, because everybody's in a different journey, as well as the fact that each organization is going to have a very different roadmap. So this is one for one CPG organization. And the reason why I say that is because every organization is set up differently, has a different culture, has a different sensibility. And all of that sort of makes this very bespoke at the end of the day. So while the capabilities are common across organizations, right? It's the same 39. The way that they're matched up and managed and then put into action within those organizations is going to vary quite a bit depending on the nature of the organization. So there's no one size fits all. And there's no path that says I got to do all of them and I got to do all of them at once.
Yeah.
Start somewhere and build.
If I did count these, is there 39 or did some of them just not even make it onto the map?
No, I think there should be 39 there.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So this was a client example. So, and I think I heard you say not anyone is doing it all well, right?
No, we're really not.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying about everybody's map will look different because it needs to fit their strategy and
Correct.
where their brand is and how fast probably they want to implement these new or can't.
Exactly.
Organizational readiness implement these capabilities.
Exactly. I mean, I'm working with a client now where they just put in a massive organizational structural change back in the fall. The good thing is that they went from, one approach to a category management approach, CPG company, category management approach, great. And they basically told everybody, here's everybody's new job. And then they didn't put the change management plan in place. And so now 6-9 months later, the organization is kind of still trying to figure out who is doing what, who owns what. And it's doing these things well really does require not only the strategy and the vision, but then that the hard work, I would say, of the change management capability that comes into this to really enable the organization to go from, one place all the way to the other. And I would not underestimate how much change management plays into that sort of transformation within an organization. And I think that's one of the other things we've seen is that as organizations have implemented some of these tools and some of these capabilities, when they don't put the change management in place, it sort of sub-optimizes the amount of money that they spent on the tool or the capability. And it kind of leaves people really frustrated because they don't know how it fits in with their job. They don't know how it necessarily fits in with the process that they have in that organization. And so, I know I'm sort of speaking a lot on that, but I just don't want to underestimate how much of this requires that piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, I have an example that shall remain nameless, but having recently come to Treasure Data, saw from two different perspectives one client that implemented a capability globally, and in one instance, the same client, it didn't go so well because of the lack of either top down, like you will do this as a mandate, and or change management. And then another situation, the one I'm, Treasure Data, where it did go well because there was that, this is how we're going to work. We're going to work differently. This is our new way of working. And, and an appropriate amount of what you were saying too, skilling, right? It's the capability and the skill and the right amount of change management. Yeah.
There's one client that I worked with that was very willing to embrace technology, and they bought Airtable for the organization. They bought Workfront for the organization. Most of these are workflow management tools because they very matrixed organization, and they spent a lot of money on these tools. Nobody wants to use them.
Yeah,
because nobody knows how to use them. And so it was very funny. We were working on a project and it was getting slowed down and gummed up in the system. And And like, well, you have all these tools. Like, why don't we know the deadlines? Like, well, nobody wants to go in and update anything. It's like, oh, just because you have a tool doesn't miraculously update by itself.
Yeah.
Somebody has to go in and maintain it. And so it's just interesting. It was a good example of a willingness to embrace a better way, a willingness to sort of put sort of, being a more agile organization into the system, but without educating everybody and training everybody and showing the importance of it. And that kind of does have to come from the top down, because that's not just going to naturally bubble up from the bottom. They've got all these expensive tools and no one to use them.
Yeah, and it has to be a conscious effort, right? You have to be very conscious that, okay, I bought this software, you can't say now I'm done, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and it has to be conscious, because it requires that integration, right?
Yes.
And breaking down of the silos, and a real, I guess, embrace of an idea that data and technology is a team sport, right?
Yeah. And to what you guys do, it's like, I can put a CDP into the organization. If I don't connect it right to the right data architecture, if I don't have the right people with the right skills, this is then where skills come into place, who can sort of leverage that data and know how to sort of launch a campaign and effectively put it into the market so the CDP can capture the right data. If I don't do all that due diligence and have all the right people in place, doesn't matter. I just recently, started working with somebody who was implementing a CDP, and they have nothing. They have no data, no nothing. They're starting from scratch. And it's been I would say it's been a 3.5 month journey just to get, who do we want to work with? What are the capabilities and skills that we need? How is this going to help us? Do we even have the right hires in place to manage it? What campaign can we test it on? What do we need to do to the campaign to enable it to read right? What are we going to do with the information on the back end? It's easily a 4-month journey, at least with this one organization, just as they contemplate building this capability. Which is great that they got to it, right? Yeah. They I need it.
Yeah.
But it takes time.
Well, it doesn't have to take that much time, right?
Well, they're a little bit. They're the same ones that have the process issues with all the other tools they built.
Yeah, so. Yeah. So it's because we've done global implementations and got folks to value in less than 4 months. So it doesn't have to
Good for you. Good for you.
Yeah. But it does sort of speak to that idea of organizational readiness and being very conscious about what you're doing. And in your 3 high hard ones or key takeaways, you mentioned outcomes-based measurement. And I feel like I'm not surprised that was there as important, right? And one of the key takeaways, because that is the motivation, right? And it requires, I think, a certain amount of curiosity to say, hey, how do I best use this? And how do I best understand the data? And, I was working with a client yesterday, and they definitely had that curiosity and that commitment. But and so that's fantastic, right? That's a key ingredient. But I think probably if that doesn't come naturally, the outcomes-based measurement kind of forces.
Well, and what are the outcomes that are valuable to the organization, right? Like, I've seen, this is where, language and whatnot sort of gets the best of an organization. Like I've seen people, build these very massive toolkits of numbers and KPIs and, data that they're going to go chase. And I'm like, and what of that is going to be actionable? And if you got all of that data and all of that information, how would you know it improved your business? And how would you know that it grew your business? So outcomes-based is actually very tightly linked to the growth of your business. It's not, I got 50,000 more fans, or I got more followers, or I got like the most shares ever on Facebook in the history of the world. Okay, great. How does that impact the outcome of your business and the growth of your business, right? And that's where it gets hard. And I think, listen, as we're all continuing to grow and evolve and learn, we all chased a lot of KPIs and a lot of numbers that were useless in the end, right? Like, what is a share? What is a like? How does that come back to value for my business, right? But listen, we were all there, right? For a long time, we thought, those were the holy grails. And I think now we've sort of evolved. And again, it comes back to that need. If marketing is going to have a seat at the C-suite, right, they're going to have to justify that spend to outcomes. Yeah. And show the CEO and show the CFO, I am spending this money and I am moving the needle.
Yeah.
If you're not doing that,
Yeah. I'm reminded of when I was at Kraft and getting a survey back of brand attributes and strengths and weakness and positioning and all that. I'm like, ran into the president's office and was like, look at all these attributes we moved the needle on. And I was so proud. I'm like, look at everything we've done. We've moved the needle on all these things. And he just looked at me and said, without excitement, I was very excited. Well, which ones did you intend to move the needle on?
Right.
It's like, right. Good question. Let me go back, rethink this, and then come back. Yeah,
exactly. And which ones actually drive value to our top line or bottom line or any line for that matter, right?
Yeah. And that takes discipline, right? Like to really go in that level of detail to work backwards.
Yes.
When we open, like, okay, what are my organization's goals? What am I being held accountable for? And then how do I work backwards and really track progress and really understand, well, what is it, Danica, that you're intending to? Right. What are you intending, and why do I care? Why does it matter?
Yeah, and I think that's where not trying to boil the ocean, because we've all seen that, the organization that wants to have every data point. Pick the 3, the 5, the 6, whatever it is that are really, to your point, that you want to move the needle on, and have a direct link in some way, shape, or form to the outcome of your business. The rest, good to know.
Yeah.
Great learning for other things. Maybe it's like, how you execute smarter or with more agility, or who knows what, or time of day or whatever. But if it doesn't link to your growth ambition, why are you measuring it?
Right.
Right. And equity measures are great things to do, and those have direct value, right, to the value of your brand and business. So yeah, you should definitely do that. But shares, likes, and fans, I don't care.
Do you feel like that as people become more and more focused on specific tactics and moving the needle on specific tactics, and I guess what I mean by that is, which are important KPIs too, opens and shares and likes and all of that is important. But do you think as we focus more on that there is that it takes away from the focus and importance of long-term activities like equity driving?
So I think we unfortunately live in a short-term thinking organization most of the time. I've seen that more often than not. I got to make my quarterly numbers, right? I got to report to the board on a quarterly basis. I got to report to the street on a quarterly basis. And so that drives a lot of that short-termness, if you will.
Yeah.
The good marketers who are really focused on the short and the long term have figured out they have to do both, right? Mm-hmm. I got to walk and chew gum at the same time. And so, I know most big global CPG organizations that I've ever worked in, they're always doing both, and they're always looking at both. And that's where, all of that social listening comes in, right? That becomes so important because, a negative comment that can go viral impacts your equity in a short-term basis, which will impact you in a long-term basis, and obviously could have a very severe impact on your outcomes that quarter, that year, right? Yeah. So you really have to do both things at the same time, right? You're always protecting your equity, and you're always listening and measuring and monitoring it, because that's your value, right? That's what allows you to charge premium prices and so on and so forth. But you also obviously need to have indicators, right? And that's what I would suggest the other things are. They're KPIs, right? Key performance indicators. It's an indicator I am moving in the right direction. I am making the right progress. It is not the answer.
Right.
It is not the outcome.
It's not the destination, right? It's not the outcome.
Right.
It is the indicator, to your point. Yeah.
And I think that also gets confused a lot in organizations, that people think the KPI is the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I got, and maybe in certain environments, open rates, let's say, are really important, right? All the open rate is telling you, oh, the things that I'm sending people, they're willing to open them.
Mm-hmm.
The outcome is, did I buy something?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So all that open rate is, it's indicating, am I on the right track or not? Now I need to link it to my outcomes that are important, sales on an open, and so on and so forth. That's where I actually think it gets much more interesting. It can get mind numbing too if you're not really focused.
Yeah, and it's super hard. It takes a lot. At least it takes a lot of discipline.
Yes.
And oftentimes probably different people are managing different bits of it. And so again, consciousness, discipline to bring the whole story together, right?
Yes.
I have said for many years, the first company that truly integrates will rule the world. Like, it's just, yeah. So let me back up a minute. And you showed the CPG slide, and I didn't put all the detail in because I just felt like it would be too hard to read on the screen. But I also know that you would make it available if someone reached out and wanted the details. But without the benefit of the detailed slide, can you tell me how you think CPG CMOs responded differently, or did they, than across the whole survey and across all the industries?
Yeah. Definitely saw differences. So I would say one of the biggest differences is CPG definitely was more focused across all three dimensions.
Right.
So the engagement model, the ecosystem, and the operating model. They were chasing all of those down in equal importance. Like I said earlier, in financial services and retail, we saw much more around obviously outcomes-based measurement, but very much linked to anything that would get them closer to a more personalized engagement. So real-time insights, single view of the customer, omni-channel orchestration, so that I can sort of follow that one consumer and build that, omni-channel relationship. We saw things around integrated digital platforms, right? I'm going to need an integrated digital platform to enable all those other things. I saw the other one that was also very common, actually across the board for most organizations, was Agile Marketing. And that everybody said they really needed to embrace a more agile model. I suspect that many people took that to mean, I need to move faster, I need to move swifter, I need to move with more ease, as opposed to the true definition of agile, like coming out of the software sort of model. But the fact that they all recognize that they have to move faster and smarter and with more ease, that was actually a fairly common thread across all sectors. But again, CPG was equally spread across all of them, so less of a focus than in other sectors where it was much more around the personalization journey and how they were going to get there. And it makes sense, right? Because CPG companies traditionally have not had a huge amount of their own first-party data, right? They're usually buying third-party data. They're starting now. I mean, Pepsi built their own, direct-to-consumer business so that they can start mining their own first-party data, and others are doing it as well. Many people are now building and working with companies like yours to build those CDP capabilities so that they can start to have a more robust personalized relationship. But other industries were ahead of CPG companies. And I think that's going to be the next big unlock.
Yeah. It's certainly why I'm employed, and it is that aspiration. And if I have that conversation once a day, I have it 10 times a day, right? How can I build a better, more personalized relationship, which requires that data foundation? How do I do it well, right? So it's certainly, I am gainfully employed because of that aspiration. So
And so take the data capability that you bring to the table and you marry that to an asset management tool, right? That allows you to take the data and then create in real time the message, right? And bring those two things together. Then hypercharge that with an AI engine, and now you got the holy grail, right? That takes time. That obviously takes time.
Yeah.
We got to start somewhere.
Right. And we have the capabilities now. So it's a commitment, and just a commitment to the strategy, I think. And the importance of having a data strategy that aligns with the overall business strategy. So with all of this, there's so much to do, right? Like there's so much to do. Where does one start? How do you get started?
I mean, listen, what I would offer to your audience for sure is I can certainly send anyone who attended our survey, happily offer you guys to take it. Take, like I said, about 20 minutes. Happy to offer also for free a diagnostic of how your results fare versus the industry at large, and then within your sector. So I'm happy to do that. In places where, like, let's say you were a food manufacturer, if you want to understand how you stacked up against other food manufacturers, I can't tell you the names of the companies specifically, but they, most likely be, people in your competitive set. I could sort the data that way. So I'm more than happy to make the survey available and do a first round diagnostic for somebody who does it, and have that conversation to kind of at least sort of give them a sense of where do they stack up versus the competition. And that doesn't mean that because you might have come out in a different place versus your competitive set, you have to do the same thing as them. That's not what that means, but at least it gives you both a foresight to your future, and it kind of gives you a little bit of a rear view mirror over your shoulder perspective of your competitors. So you kind of get the best of both worlds.
Yeah. So when we talked about that, no one organization is doing everything well, no big surprise there.
Right.
When they are doing it well, can you just think of some things that, this is a best practice, or this really, is working?
I think when they've thought of and connected the capabilities, I think that's when, so like, for example, if I wanted to really build that outcome-based measurement capability, they've sort of stacked it up with the 3 or 4 other capabilities that they need in order to enable it. So I think sort of having a holistic view is the right way to do it and is the best practice. That doesn't mean that you have to implement everything at the same time. So I don't want anyone to misconstrue that comment, but there are certain capabilities that do have, like I said, that interconnectivity, that unless you stack the pieces together to enable it, it's just not going to work. So just know that you really should sort of have the vision and the destination in mind, but you could take your time for how you get there. But each of those pieces is going to play an important role, and each of those capabilities will play an important role in the, the ease or rockiness of that journey to the destination.
Yeah. And one of the things I see with my clients as a best practice is a cadence of checking in, right? A cadence of holding, okay, here's our plan, right? And this is our progress to our plan. And let's, think about it again. We readjust if we need to, but it is the focused cadence, right?
Yes.
And saying, what's the next step? How can I further leverage this?
Yep.
How can I, democratize wisdom and elevate expertise in new places in my organization, right? Either new functions or new brands or new use cases or new geographies, just how can I expand it, and just being very, again, disciplined and conscious about it, and on a regular cadence, holding everybody accountable to do what we're all here to do. And then it's to better serve, right? Better serve our consumers and deliver those experiences.
Yeah, I mean, and to your point about the cadence is, yes, it's good to sort of roadmap out that journey and what you're going to do when, and then sort of having that sense of agility of things will change, right? The marketplace is moving so fast, and new capabilities and new tools are coming all the time. So having that sense of, I like to use the sort of flying the plane while you're building it mentality. And I think that's just the world that we live in today.
Yeah, right?
And so having that sensibility of, I'm always going to be flying the plane, and I'm always going to be building new speed into the engine, or, more luxury into the seats, or, a better view of the landscape, whatever the case may be. You're always going to be in that mode of flying and building. And that does, I'll be honest, to some marketers I've seen, that is a real disruption. Like, I just want to build the plane and just fly it. I've seen that, right? But I think as long as you have that level of discomfort in change, I think you're going to be a much better marketer. And a lot of people don't like discomfort, right? They want, I want to build it and go. And I think you just need to be able to flex both muscles these days in order to be successful.
Get comfortable with discomfort.
Exactly.
And I know some people refer to that as dynamic stability, right? Like, and that I thought of that because you were mentioning the idea of a plane, right? So it's dynamic stability. That plane has to be dynamic to be stable, right? And to keep accelerating up, right? And ascending. So
correct.
Yeah.
Correct. I think it's a great way to put it, for sure.
Yeah. So there's just a couple of questions I've answered already. Some of the questions I asked you were from that, and then there was just another one I want to address before we close, and it was if Treasure Data, if we provide that training, right, and if you think about the importance of the skills and knowing how to use the data, and expanding, if data is a team sport, right, then you have to teach the team to play the sport.
Right.
And and so the answer is yes, of course. Yes, we do that. We have a training academy. We have services there for that, for sure. And a lot of things are just made very easy anyway, right? Which we can do better with technology now, and built-in capabilities like machine learning and predictive analytics. So as I knew it would be, Carole, this has been great fun. Love our chat. Thank you for joining us again. I know everybody will be happy to know that you're willing to share all of the detail and provide some consultation on how to assess where you are against where you want to go.
Yes.
And how to make progress as fast, right? And
so I don't know if I know that after some of these, you send out the recording or whatnot. If you want, I'll send you the link to the survey. You can include that in the follow-up email. And like I said, anyone who wants to take it, I'll include my email. Just tell me you want to take it. I'll give you the link. Will be there from Danica, and then just go for it. And then we'll set a date and we'll talk.
All right. That sounds great. Carole, I can't wait till the next fun thing we find to do together. And I want to I want to thank everybody in the audience for joining us, whether it's now or in some distance on demand replay. So thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
And thank you, Danica. Enjoy the rest of summer, everybody.
All right. Thanks. Cheers.